Hello and welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to. The Helios blog. Today, Jordan Peterson tells us we're already living in 1984. What could that mean?
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
This friend of mine says something similar to me this week, by the way. He said, very wise man with much experience, he said he believes that we're entering the most difficult phase of this conflict. And you alluded to something similar. Why did that idea make itself present to you? And why do you regard that as an accurate summation of what's happening?
I think it's difficult. As an actor, you're trained, a tiny part of your brain is trained. It's such a small part of your brain. It's to be present and to remember at the same time. So it's a tiny part of your brain in conflict. And that creates a sense of, I can see something's happening. And actually, it came to me by realizing, sitting in court, when you put this ideology to reason, to cold scrutiny, to proper and rigorous inquiry.
He's talking about womanist wokeism, by the way.
It has nowhere to go. It has nowhere to run.
Indeed.
It can't survive a conversation. None of it can survive a conversation. And you notice that as, you know, these little sparks that appear in society, like anti-Semitism and people feeling that they can identify totally as their own little crowd group in Britain, you think that people are beginning to run out of patience. And they're just signs. And I think Peter Boghossian put it really, really well. He said, this is coming to an end, and everyone is going to say that they never played part. And I suppose in a sort of roundabout and rather stupid way, I'm trying to say I can tell it's coming to an end. I can just see it coming to an end. And I know it's coming to an end because it doesn't make any sense. And nature abhors a vacuum. And we've had a vacuum now for a very, very long time.
Okay, so I'll play devil's advocate there again. So I talk frequently with both Jonathan Pageau, who's been a cardinal player in this ARC enterprise, who's a very wise person, and with Michael Mellis. They're quite different people because Pageau is a icon carver and a deep Christian, trained as well in the postmodern ethos, so he understands both sides of the argument. And Michael Mellis is kind of a libertarian anarchist, but both of them both of them believe that we're not going to get through this bout of ideological conflict without some really serious trouble.
Yup, that's my impression as well. As worrisome as that sounds.
And my sense is more agnostic. I believe that the future isn't written in blood, and that if we conducted ourselves wisely, we could have a virtual apocalypse, let's say, instead of the real thing that we could.
Well, how often have people conducted themselves wisely?
Could work this out in the realm of ideas. We could tilt ourselves back on the upward path without the kind of mayhem that sometimes accompanies a transformation of ideology. Now, there's some precedent for this. Obviously, when the Soviet Union collapsed, that was much less bloody than we had any right to hope or expect. So, but then I'm really torn about this because I look at the universities and I think, oh my God, you guys are so far gone that nothing but your total collapse is going to bring about a transformation. And when
sadly, indeed,
I start thinking that that's a rather pessimistic view, something like what happened in Washington happens, and you get the president of MIT and Harvard and UPenn, all three woefully underqualified for the job, come out and say in unison something so utterly blood-curdling and preposterous that it's surreal. You think, well, it's a long ways yet to the bottom.
Oh, they're wokest womanists. They follow the religion.
And so you think it's going to come, you think you intimated that you believe that this is going to come to an end. I don't have any vision of how things are going to lay themselves out over the next few years. I can't predict it. And so, but you said you have a sense. I can see, look, I put up 5 YouTube videos last year that were all critical of the climate narrative. And basically nothing happened to me as a consequence. YouTube put up a few warnings, that like they always do about how climate change is this ultimate catastrophe, but they left them alone. And almost all the comments were positive. And certainly the climate catastrophe narrative has taken a vicious hit in the last year. And people are pretty tired of the trans stupidity. So, but then you see the depth of corruption in places.
People are tired of the womanist wokest narrative as well.
Like the universities, and you think, oh my God, how much trouble is there going to have to be before sanity does prevail?
I suppose what gives you a sense that things are going to change. I was quite affected by something that you said quite early on. And weirdly, my dad, who broke the car, like he slammed the brakes on in the car when I was about 8 years old, and he went, postmodernism is evil. And I was like, well, I didn't understand, but I could just remember it. And he was obviously listening to the BBC or something. And you said this thing quite early on, and Dad actually introduced all of us to you, to varying degrees of love, let's put it that way. and one of the things that I thought was this idea that you raised, which was when this thing is overthrown, what comes? A sort of Hitlerian figure comes, doesn't he, out of the Weimar, which is, Victor Davis Hanson talks about how we're in this sort of leisured, affluent Weimar period, and from that comes a Hitlerian figure. And one of the greatest things that I think about Britain, and John Anderson said this to me as well when he spoke, he said, when things get really, really bad, people are going to look at Britain. They're going to look to Britain, and they're going to look at your legal system, and we're going to look at the way that you've been going around, you've reformed, you've unreformed, you've reversed revolutions, you've done all this stuff. And I think that there is, within the English patience, the fundamental English patience, there's a real stoic solidness to it. And I think that that's what will ultimately end this period. That we cannot have, people are now openly laughing at the way universities are talked about.
Yup, indeed.
In the UK, anyone who is vaguely awake is turning around and saying, don't send your kids to universities. We do what we do via the Bad Law Project to challenge the government over certainly stuff that they're teaching in schools. And I think a sort of bloodless coup is possible, but part of me is like, this is going to end violently. But it might end violently. It might end violently in a good way, for want of a better word, which is that they get so upset and so angry and so annoyed that no one is listening to them, and that British people still want to protect their culture and not have it diluted and stuff like that, that there's a big riot. We've already seen what's going on in London over the last 3 weeks, and Britain just galvanizes itself. We're very tough like that. And that gives me some hope. Admittedly, it's fleeting often, but it does give me some, it gives me hope that it can be. How quickly was McCarthyism, they just said go, didn't they? It was just like goodbye, out, and I think that something similar might happen.
Well, it might depend, it might depend on how effectively, it will depend, I think, on how effectively people conduct themselves. And, I think that for...
Jordan said it himself. It only takes about 10% of the population to be of like mind for things to change. 10% of people behaving how they're supposed to.
For people like you and I, whatever we can do to strive to keep enmity out of our hearts is going to all be to the good. Like, I am very unimpressed with the leader of Canada. I would have a very difficult time shaking his hand. I really detest him. And you know, possibly the right attitude would be to wish the better part of him well and to hope that he could escape from his narcissistic entrapment, you know?
Hilarious.
But he
And
won't.
that's probably, well, you know, stranger things have happened. It is possible for people to undergo quite dramatic transformations of character. I mean, that happens to Saul on the way to Damascus, right? I mean, you can have a transformative moment, and I suppose if you had any sense, that's what you'd wish for everyone, that they could see the light properly. I think that if people on the alternative vision side, well, we're seeing this with ARC, you know, like we put a bunch of videos up on YouTube that came from the ARC conference. And the more political they are, the less popular they are.
Indeed.
The more visionary, the more metaphysical, and the more humorous they are, the better they're performing, right? And then the comments are also extremely positive on the apolitical, visionary talks and very negative on the political talks. And so I think that is a reflection, too, of the fact that, you know,
People don't like politics anymore. People think politics is stupid, like, because the politicians are not to be trusted and so on. Big surprise. Yeah, for many years now. Anyway.
if we're going to, those of us who are interested in standing against the use of arbitrary force should be very careful about not even secretly being pleased when unnecessary force is used. Well, again, and that's another thing that makes the camera issue so bloody complicated. I mean, I still think your arguments about opposing their distribution I think your arguments are correct. And I think that form of civil disobedience is not only appropriate, but morally called for. You also mentioned, that one of your hallmarks for distinguishing between useful and dangerous civil disobedience is the humor that goes along with it. And I think that's a really good marker too. The most popular speech that emerged out of the art conference was Konstantin Kizin's speech. And Konstantin is damn good at interleaving the serious with the lighthearted and self-deprecating and absurd. So there is something about that allowance for the absurd that does seem to be a touchstone for honest communication. You see that too, so many of the great YouTubers are comedians or ex-comedians, right? And that's not fluke. They're good at listening to the audience, and they don't take themselves too seriously, and those are profound markers of the sort of character that you might be able to trust. Let me ask you.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was
Lawrence.
just saying, perhaps we're witnessing one of the other things that we're witnessing, which is either new or not new. My knowledge of history is not obviously the greatest. Is this idea of the political influencer via social media? The absence of a political leader. We've got the Labour Party and the Conservative Party in the UK. The Conservative Party took in 30 million in donations in the last quarter of 2022 or whenever it was. Labour took in 3 million. The insurgent party, Reform, which is currently polling, they say, at 10%, took in £20,000. So it seems to me that there is zero appetite for a change politically, but there is a huge appetite for a change culturally, or a realignment culturally, so that people always say to me, you get it times a million. But when I'm stopped on the street, people say to me, "Thank you for trying to protect our culture. Thank you." And that comes from not weirdly, just normally, but it's overwhelmingly people who are new arrivals to this country, who came to this country to succeed, who want to play on a fair playing field. They wanted to leave the oppressions and the oppression hierarchies of the places that they lived in before behind, and they wanted to fight on a fair playing field. And so I wonder whether we're also going to see the rise in the political influencer. The Rock might run for it, or Tucker Carlson might become, Trump's VP. Doubtable, but it is. But whether the entire social media landscape and all of the new media has, you've got it with the Daily Wire. If Ben Shapiro decided to run for office, who knows what would happen? It's a sort of strange development. Anyway, that was my sort of aside to your point.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you something more personal here for a bit. What exactly is happening with you as a consequence of the legal entanglements that have enveloped you? Like, what are you in danger of? I mean, I know the process is the punishment, and everyone, the police who came to round you up, are part and parcel of that. What were the police like? What are the police like? Like, the thing that's so striking to me about the police in the UK and in North America is that it isn't obvious to me that their natural allies are the, woke utopians. And so how did the police who came, tell us the story about the police coming to your house. How did they treat you? And what's your family? What are you and your family going through at the moment?
Okay, so the police, I have to confess to being a pathetic actor, and actors always want to please their audience.
I don't understand.
So when the police turned up, I tried to make friends with them. And I could make friends with everyone except for the arresting officer who'd got his big day. And that was hard. But even by the end of the day, I think I won him round. And look, I said to them, can I take a book with me? Because I'm going to be in the cells. And they were nice enough to let me take a book, so I finished off the Gulag Archipelago, which was quite a useful time in the cells. And you're thinking, well, I don't have it that bad. In terms of the police, I think I think that I want to apply this.
They're not really. It's not really the police that do the bad. They're the arm of the people that do bad. They're the agent, but they're not the bad person. I don't know if that makes sense.
I must apply this because otherwise I would go insane. That what people are doing is not necessarily who they are. So I think that, there was they were quite charged up when they came in and they really wanted to get involved. But by the end of the day, I think I won them over. And they were actually sympathetic, even though they did nothing about it. When I said, please, can I have my children's phones and iPads back? Because what have they got to do with this? And there was a really touching moment, and it was horrible actually, because I'm stood in a police station next to a kid, 19-year-old kid or younger, with like forensic sleeves on his arms. So those white forensic sleeves, he's covered in blood.
Oh,
jeez. And I'm stood next to him, and he's obviously
Horrible.
just killed somebody.
Horrible.
And I'm thinking, wow, we're being treated with the same level of seriousness by the law. So that gave me pause for thought. In terms of my family, I have my dad is, as I think I've sort of alluded to in this conversation with you, he was on this stuff in the 1985, I think I was on that car journey when he was going. So he's sympathetic. He doesn't necessarily approve of my tactics. My one brother up is a beautiful and wonderful, stern brother, but he's really there for you when you need him. But he again is not necessarily approving of my tactics. My sister and I, we disagree about everything. Our politics are completely different, and we get on like a house on fire. So it's like, how do you know about these things? And then the people that I really feel sorry for are my children, because a really well-known actor went up to my son at school, because my little son goes to the most dreadful school that Britain has to offer by miles. It's just dreadful, full of rich celebrities, very woke celebrities. They teach, it's all transgenderism, the whole thing.
Disaster. Yep. Lovely.
Is transgenderism. And this actor took it upon himself.
Womanist wokeism.
To go up to my son and tell him that his dad was a fascist. And that's
oh yeah, that's pleasant. How old's your son?
He was 11 at that point.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
What an insult. What a cruel thing to do.
Great. Well, I guess that guy picked on someone his own size, eh?
Trying to turn a child against his own father.
Yeah, so that is difficult. But my kids, the whole point of doing anything you ever do is for you and for your kids, I think part of the process of meaning, full stop, is to remedy some of the things that, it's to try and refine the mechanism of the family and all those sorts of things as you learn from your father and your mother, the mistakes they made, and you go, well, I'll try not to make that mistake. So your life is constantly driven by meaning. You're always trying to find meaning in it. So therefore, with my kids, they understand me and they get me and they know who I am, and I'm flattered and honoured to be their parent, and that's how it is. I mean, is it difficult? Yes, it's difficult, but is it difficult to be sat in a situation in life where you had no choice, no say, and your life was ended like that? So I like these old truisms. I like these old these things that someone's got it worse than you. I like those things. I like sticks and stones may break my bones. I like that. I like all of these things because it reminds you that you are entrenched in a reality of your own making, which is...
Yes, indeed. And ultimately, it's up to you to make the best of the life that you have, and the way that you can control the life that you have is through your own actions, through your own choices.
Isn't as bad as it could be. So be tough and be strong and love as much as you can.
And how about your wife? How has she managed with all the disruptions in your career and you putting yourself and your family, well, in one way on the line? I mean, it's tricky, right? Because you're always putting your family on the line in one way or another. Like, there's no escape from that in life, and so really what you do is you decide how you're going to lay things on the line. But often what people will do is take illusory short-term security in preference to actually addressing the issue at hand. And I mean, you've suffered a dreadful amount of disruption, especially on the career front, as a consequence of your political stances. And what's that done to your marriage?
Well, my marriage ended in 2016, and she is a very interesting character who is using the we really need to have a look at the family courts in the UK. We're still arguing in family court. Weirdly, whichever political case I have seems to work its way into a family court case at the same time, which is different. But what my partner is still water. She just when I go, I can't. This is mad. It's too much. She just goes, "It's okay. It's okay. You'll be all right. Do you want to talk about it?" And she's still water and I'm fire, and that works for me.
Oh yeah.
Because as you said, you've got a temper. I've got a real temper. Like yesterday when I was with my kids and I was saying, we got to go and see Grandpa and everyone, and they're like, the car's going to come in 4 minutes. And they're like, I'm ready. And it's like, then the car arrives and no one's ready. And you're just like, kids, come on, go.
Indeed.
So my partner she's the ice and the cooling to the fire that I can be sometimes.
Right. Well, that's handy. That's handy to have someone who can let you take a sober second thought. Yeah. So what are your plans? What are you doing now, and what are your plans for the future?
So now,
how are you keeping body and soul together even?
Well, it's really annoying. I had a neck operation. So I used to keep my body and soul together by exercising, but I had a neck operation and that stopped me from being able to exercise. So I need to work out a system of doing that. What I'm doing is I'm taking the government to court for non-contact child abuse of children in school via their transgender policies in the UK. Schooling in schools, because it's disgusting what they're teaching our children, and we've put together a big case, and we're going to take the Department of Education to court. I'm fighting the
Who's we?
The womanist wokists.
Who's we?
At least somebody's doing it.
So I started not. Once I realised that politics is fine, but it's not what people care about. People are going to vote red, they're going to vote blue, they're going to vote red, they're going to vote blue, they're going to swap one time or another. We thought, okay, what are the other things that we can do to change stuff? So we started up something called the Bad Law Project, which is my team, which is a small team. It's about 6-8 people. And I have I have a barrister and a solicitor within that team. And we are going to take the Department of Education to court to stop them teaching our kids this stuff. Because once we stop them teaching the kids this stuff, then what comes out of university is not going to be such a problem.
Indeed. That's right.
We're fighting, we have an MP in Andrew Bridgen in Northwest Leicestershire who was kicked out of the Conservative Party for criticising the COVID vaccine rollout and saying that it did cause some problems. And then we do bits of media stuff as well, just to sort of, offer up some thoughts about life. So we try and look at it as a stool whereby we have legal, political, and media. And I'll do that until I can't take it anymore. But at the moment, I'm sat totally desperate because I've walked out of my libel case 2 weeks ago, and I'll get a judgment before Christmas. And it will be a very, very important judgment for the UK because the judge is being asked to define the meaning of the word racist.
Okay. Well, we're going to end the video there. Seems like there's some serious things brewing for 2024. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all the notifications. Drop me a donation like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom and Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, and Brian. Shout out to you, most recent Patreon subscriber. Thank you. If you want coaching, message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com. Buy my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. My Patreon can be found at patreon.com/theheliosblog. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.